participating with unbelievers in pagan worship or letting unbelievers participate with you in the true worship. And this seems so obvious and so straightforward, you would think we couldn't miss it, but the church has missed it for a long time. The church has opened its doors throughout its history to false teachers and let them come in and do their work, which eats like gangrene, as Paul says it, which pollutes and destroys the mind and wrecks the faith of people. The church has thrown its doors open wide to that kind of false teaching, and it is still doing it even today. In fact, the church today is trying very hard to embrace the culture and to redefine itself on a cultural level so that unbelievers feel comfortable there. An unimaginable strategy in the light of this principle. The indication of this text couldn't be more clear. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. And again, the context is a context of spiritual enterprise, spiritual activity, worship, teaching, evangelism, and ministry. Well, let's go back to verse 14 and just remind ourselves of the command that is at the heart of this text. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. And you remember that he draws that unequal yoking picture from back in Deuteronomy, where the prescription of God to the children of Israel was don't hook up an ox and an ass to the same plow, or you cannot get a straight furrow. Those two beasts have different natures. Common spiritual enterprise is the issue here, and you can't link a believer to an unbeliever and achieve a godly end. All you will do is divert from the true purposes of God and inevitably corrupt the believers who are engaged in such an unholy alliance. Do not be bound together with unbelievers. Now, there are 5 motives to this. There are 5 reasons for this. And I've shared them with you, at least the beginning. Let's go back and review the first 2. First of all, such a partnership is irrational. It is irrational, and that is Paul's point as he asks some rhetorical questions that are really axiomatic and all imply negative answers. Verse 14, for what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness, or what harmony has Christ with Belial or Satan, or what has a believer in common with an unbeliever? All of those rhetorical questions are intended to show the irrationality of believers and unbelievers linking together in any spiritual enterprise. The answer to those is self-evident. That's why we call them axioms. An axiom is a self-evident truth. It is obvious that righteousness and lawlessness can't be partners. Light and darkness can't fellowship. Christ and Satan can't work together, and believers and unbelievers don't share anything in common spiritually. It is absolutely irrational to do that. In other words, common sense would tell you that is counterproductive. How can 2 walk together unless they agree, said the prophet Amos. Secondly, and we're still reviewing, it is not only irrational to be linked with unbelievers in any spiritual enterprise, it is sacrilegious. It is sacrilegious. This is far more weighty as an argument or a motive than the first one. Notice verse 16. What agreement has the temple of God with idols? Answer, none. For we are the temple of the living God. Just as God said, I will dwell in them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Now remember that I told you that all false religion is demon worship. An idol is nothing, but a demon is behind that nothing, impersonating that deity, so that the worship of idols, the worship of any false religion, is nothing more than the worship of demons. Demon doctrines propagated by seducing spirits through hypocritical liars, says the Apostle Paul to Timothy. It is all part of the satanic counterfeit coming from one disguised as an angel of light who wants to damn people through the means of religion. All false religious systems are demonic. And Paul says to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 10, you can't eat the table of the Lord and the table of demons. You can't keep going back and forth. It is blasphemous. And the reason is, you are the temple of the living God. And I love the phrase, the living God. Paul likes to use that whenever he's talking about idols, because he sets it over against the dead idols. You are the temple of the living God. You cannot bring idols into his temple. Remember what happened? We saw that last time in Ezekiel. Ezekiel saw the idols in the temple of God, and God left, and Ichabod was written on the temple. Nor can you take the temple of God and put it in a temple of idols. We saw that in 1 Samuel, didn't we? Chapter 4, where they took the Ark of the Covenant, the Philistines did, and they put it in the temple of Dagon, the fish god. And God knocked Dagon over and cut off his head and cut off his hands, and brought about a plague of mice that brought a black death upon the population, and those that didn't die were struck with tumors. You cannot take the temple of God and put it in an idol temple, and you cannot take an idol and put it in the temple of God. We cannot coexist. And here were the Corinthians, who were the temple of God, going into an idol temple and eating and involved in a festival, and sometimes in the iniquitous things that went on. And here were the Corinthians taking false teachers who really are satanic and bringing them into the church, which is the corporate temple of God, and letting them have a place and teach and influence. And such blasphemous activity is sacrilegious. We are the temple of the living God. We can have nothing to do with idols, idolatry. So the mandate then is supported, first of all, by the reasonableness of it and the reverence of it. To be bound with unbelievers in any spiritual enterprise is irrational and sacrilegious. That's exactly what the Corinthians were doing. That is exactly what is forbidden here. It is irrational and it is sacrilegious. When you came to Christ, you became the temple of the living God. You cannot take the temple of the living God and put it in a temple to idols, in a demon environment, without desecrating the very name of God. All right, let's come to a third point. To be bound together with unbelievers is also disobedient. It is not just irrational and sacrilegious, it is disobedient. And verse 17 makes that abundantly clear, because it says, "Therefore come out from their midst and be separate, says the Lord, and do not touch what is unclean." So here you have a direct command. So someone who links up with false religionists is in direct disobedience. Therefore is a very important link. Since you are the temple of God, since God walks in you, since you are his own possession, as verse 16 says, therefore make a clean break.